these themes of limerence, love addiction, of longing, of fantasy, of ideation, they have been big themes in my life, of my healing journey. In fact, it was a toxic domestic violence abusive relationship. It was the end of that relationship that was what made me start to look into healing, into personal development, and trying to grow as a person. So it's a huge part of the work that I continue to do. But the reason that I hadn't made the video was because I'm still single. And so I thought in a perfect world, I would find my perfect partner, this like amazing relationship, so secure, so loving. And then I would come on here and say, this is how I did it. And you can trust me because I have the proof, right? Recently, I had an insight come in that really changed the way that I look at the work that I've been doing with myself and just how I relate to this topic, that has made such a profound impact on me that I don't think I'll ever look at it the same way again. Because I do think that a lot of the video and content right now on dating advice, if you're single and you've looked it up, you've seen it, you know that it revolves heavily upon, detaching, focusing on yourself, being high value. You can look at it, from very many different communities. And the message is that and it's subtle, there's a hidden transaction in your healing, and then you'll be worthy of love. There's the implication that with someone who already suffers from worthiness wounds and not enoughness or too muchness, it's continuing to perpetuate this idea that you'll one day be worthy of it, even if it's not said that way. We're not negotiating. Okay, that's the most important thing I want you to understand, is that there's no negotiating here. You're not telling life like, look, I'll finally be good enough. You might not know it right away, but there is an undercurrent that you're still negotiating your worth. And we're not doing that. There's nothing to negotiate. It's always been there. And this is coming from Lover Girl, who is like, do not tell me that I need to work on myself and I might not get a man, because I feel like you're just trying to get me to sell out. You're trying to get me to settle, and I'm not going to settle. That's how I would have taken it. All of this to explain at the very end all of the practical tips and things that I've learned about this pattern. And first, though, I'd like to run through a quick summary of the history. So I believe that this core wound began with my parents and the way that they related to each other. So I had an absent father, grew up with a single mom of 4 girls. So I have 3 sisters, and I never talked to my mom about where our dad was, why he wasn't there. It was like, I just knew that was a painful subject, and I just lived with that ache and hurt and like longing. And getting older, becoming a woman myself, I realized that my mom, she waited for him, and there was a lot of longing for him. And me too, as a child, I longed for a father. And later on in life, this ideation continued to play a big role in my relationships and how they developed. And the relationship that really got me to get serious about my healing work was after my separation. That would be a relationship that I entered in 2017, where the person ended up being physically abusive. The fantasy and not checking into reality and the delusionality was so strong in me that it allowed these things to continue. And also just like the hopefulness and that my love will be so strong, and if I can forgive the unforgivable, that's what will do it. And so when that relationship ended is when I decided to start looking into my behaviors, because it was something I could no longer deny. The abuse was so bad that I really had to be real and get real with myself. And I won't say that I did that right away. A year after my breakup, I was partying a whole lot, drinking, and it was a very unsafe time in my life. And that got horribly bad. I was really spiraling into a terribly dark place. And I knew that I needed to do something about it, which my solution was to move out of state and basically seclude myself so that I could really go deep and go in and do the work that I needed to do. I set off on this journey. I learned meditation, I get into Reiki, yoga, and I stop cold turkey going out. I'm not dating for 3 years. And in 2023, at the end of 2023, was when I finally decided to get back on the dating apps. And then again, as my pattern goes, I get off the apps for a long time, slowly decide that I get back on. And that's kind of been the thing. And then again, at the end of 2025, I met someone, but we only went on a few dates. So this is the pattern. Okay. And in not in every single circumstance and every single person do I meet does the like anxious attachment, longing come out. It's only certain people. And that's important too, because again, at the very end, when I give the practical tips, it will make a lot more sense. A lot of the men that I've dated, and I've gone on a lot of dates, they're just normal men. They're not these monsters who are trying to manipulate and do all this. They're just normal people, and we just didn't work. It just didn't work, and that's fine. What I noticed was that as the time went on, I first met the first guy in 2023, and then these like long periods would happen, is that internally I also felt like I was coming across like a biological clock thing too, and just feeling increasing pressure that was this really been building up during those long breaks that I would take between dating. That's when I would pour all of the energy back into me, and I would focus on my friends, on whatever I'm interested in and learning. And my own personal interests are all of those things. I love mindfulness and shamanism and astrology. And so inevitably, whenever there is like, oh, what's your fortune? What does astrology say is for you? Whenever I would get readings and things, and I would feel better and secure enough to ask about love. Well, when might love come in for me? I noticed that these things would perpetuate that like idealization or fantasy, because these tools would say things like in October of one certain year I was going to meet someone. So like October comes and I'm like, is it you? Is it you? It was not a comfortable thing for me. It was like way too much pressure. And I noticed that all of these tools of looking ahead and predicting, they didn't put me at ease. They, for some reason, heightened the more obsessive or insecure parts of me. Then you start to kind of feel doubtful. And these hurts and these failed relationships, it's like death by 1,000 cuts in a way. And it's almost like it's starting to touch not just loneliness or wanting partnership, but almost like an existential aloneness that is being triggered. And it's a very deep grief that is happening, and it's not even specific to a person, and that's what's tricky, is that it is unspecific and you can't say it's just this person. It's harder to justify that, and it's easier to judge yourself and say, I should be stronger than this. This means that I'm weak. This means that I'm reliant, that I am dependent. And it's easy to start to feel like it's a flaw that you care to begin with. By the way, there is a connection between being excited by those lightning strike moments and those unavailable people and the inability to be able to discern what safe, reliable love looks like, because those feel completely opposite. And so, I'll talk about it more again in the practical tips, but it is also just a recognition that it's that same tendency that landed me in the abusive relationship to begin with, because it is that not looking at the true reality check of the moment. And it also kind of feels like life is letting you down. On that subject of grief, is like life is letting me down because I'm showing up, I'm being vulnerable, I'm keeping my heart open time and time and time again despite being hurt. It's so important to always choose the harsh reality over the idealized fantasy. of a situation. What is true right now? Right now, what is true is today, at this very moment, they're not here. They're not real. They're not real. It's just me interacting with the mental image that I've made of this person and reckoning with that, as painful as it is, because that idealization and that longing, all that you're trying to do is delay that grief and that truth. So be very careful about continuing to delay that, because not only are you delaying the grief, but you're also delaying the healing that could come through being truly honest with the situation. So the most recent insight is that this time that this kind of longing and sadness got kicked back up, I actually was in a ceremony, a plant medicine ceremony, and I had this insight come in because I was able to sit in the witness consciousness where I'm feeling these things come up, but there's a separation, I'm not totally enmeshed and identified with what I'm feeling. And I realized that if for the rest of my life, or for the rest of eternity even, if all that I did was just continue to care about how I feel and tend to my heart and my emotions, no partner, no children, no family, if all that I did for the rest of my life was just care and care over and over again about how I feel, that would be enough. Immediately after, I started to think about Ram Dass. I love Ram Dass, and he talks about how all of life is a ceremony, like all of life is your spiritual sadhana, your spiritual practice. Sometimes it's literally spiritual practices and you're doing the very specific rituals that you've been taught. And sometimes your spiritual practice is your relationship, is your family, is your husband, is your child, is whatever, your work. Whatever is causing you pain, you're working with it. You're taking it and you're working with it. And I felt very strongly that I could take it or leave it with anything. Like, oh, well, seeing it that way, I could take a partner or I could leave it or I could just not have one. But what I was understanding was that the work will happen regardless. I'm still in partnership work with this ghost of a partner and how I relate to a ghost of a partner. Essentially, what I'm suggesting is that the pain of the moment, if I am unhappy with my current state, then this pattern continues. Later on, you can find a way to be unhappy in partnership. You can find a way to feel lonely when you're surrounded by people, when you're with your family, whoever you're with. You can find ways to feel unhappy. And maybe instead of like, gosh, I wish I had someone, it's like, I wish I didn't have this person. Man, this person weighs me down. And so when I see that it's not a finish line, the work continues. When I realized that, when that insight came in, it was like, huh, looking at it that way, I could take it or leave it. It's fine. If I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. Now I would like to switch over and give some practical tips of things that I've picked up and I understand now as a result of many years of circling and cycling across this particular wound. The first thing, the biggest thing that is going to help you navigate something like this is going to be awareness. Is going to be learn what I mean when I talk about the witness consciousness, when you're objectively looking at everything that you're doing, including the analysis. That I think that would be the first recommendation. And then have awareness in the sense of knowing what your patterns are when if you view this as an addiction, then you'll have some telltale signs of when you're starting to slide into unhealthy territory. And that could be the impulse to keep watching pick a card readings, or it could be the hire another psychic or whatever. You'll have these, or some people it's like stalking, whatever it is. Just know what your telltale signs are that you're starting to lose yourself and starting to cross the territory, and set boundaries around those, as well as knowing how to be the witness consciousness, so that when these pangs of longing and that wound comes up and that feeling comes up and your heart is hurting, that you're able to let that pass through you. without needing to make a story. Develop the ability to just witness what is and let it pass through you, because it will pass. The other practical tip would be, this is if you know that you have the tendency to go back. Keep yourself tethered to reality, because if your pattern is to go back, then it may be helpful for you to journal and write about all of the inner turmoil and be very specific about the things that this person did, because if they do happen to come back around, you can pull on that. You can go back and say, right, look at everything that I've overcome. Do I really want to go back there and end up right back there? Is that really worth it for those however many minutes of feeling like, oh, you see, I was worthy. You see, they did miss me. They did love me. Is that really worth it for you? And I think that if you're really honest about what you went through, it'll be a clear and easy decision that it's not, that it's not worth it. The other practical tip is that I actually released a video about your life path and how do you know if you're on the right path. I think that watching that video would be very helpful for this situation as well, because shifting the way that you look at what it means to be on the right path. If you think that there's one right path, you're more likely to believe that you have missed your calling, missed your person, and to live in regret. I go into it a lot more in depth in that other video. I would recommend it. The next is, again, to add to what I said about letting things pass through you. Part of this is also that when you do feel these symptoms of, heartache and heartbreak and longing and intense just desire, know that all of that is normal and it's human and there's nothing to pathologize. Just if you're like, oh, I just felt this intense desire, it's normal. Longing is human. Would recommend, if you're having a really hard time of just letting it pass by, like you feel like it's really bubbling up within you, to talk to somebody that you really trust, who you know will hold non-judgmental space, is a really good idea too. Just when someone else can also help you feel like what you're experiencing is normal, that is helpful too, to have a friend, that you can go to. Or maybe you're somebody who likes to pray about these issues and ask God for help. I think that's beautiful. And then really focus on your community and your well-being, and like doing things that nurture and fill you up and bring all of that energy back to you. Keep taking care of yourself no matter what. Do not stop taking care of yourself, because even if it feels like it's fucked, like you're doomed, there's a possibility, even if there's a 5% chance that in a month's time or a week's time, this won't bother you at all, then you will be glad that you maintained your wellness routines and that you continue to take care of yourself, and just do it like, in the case that I might not feel this hopeless, I'll be so glad that I continue to make nutritious meals for myself and I continue to go to yoga, and I'll be glad. And if you can't, don't beat yourself up. If you're like, no, that is impossible for me right now, I'm in the pits of depression, go just do small little things, like have a few sips of water. What is the next accessible thing that you can do that takes care of yourself? It doesn't have to be a grand thing. It doesn't have to be that you're doing the most, but even just one thing that tells you that you are still important to yourself, you've got to do it. The other thing is that when you go to friends and you focus on community, then anytime you're in relation with someone, doesn't have to be romantic, but you are using skills that you need in order to relate and connect, these intimacy skills. And so for someone who has more of love addiction, limerence, and romantic wounds, it's easier to develop and strengthen these relational skills with friends, or with family, or in a community, because it doesn't have that triggering aspect. But yet you're still working on and cultivating the skills that you're going to need in partnership anyway. So that's another bonus of why it would be good to turn to community and friends. The next practical tip I have is actually listening to the Crappy Childhood Fairy. So the Crappy Childhood Fairy has a YouTube channel. Her name is Anna Rung. She's amazing. She's not a therapist. She says it very clearly in all her videos, and she's coming from experience. People will write in and they share their stories, and then she is honest. She will be very honest and say, like, here is a projection. Like, this isn't real. This person, this situation, it's not real. And she gives that dose of truth that you need to be able to hopefully start to let go of things. And one thing that Anna said one time that really stuck with me, and this was a long time ago, but this is how impactful it was that I remember it to this day. Something I heard so long ago. She was reading a story, and this happens all the time. People have this sentiment, and I have this sentiment too. If only I had played it cool, if only I had played more mind games, if only I had been less of this or done more of this. And one time Anna said, like, oh, just if you just weren't you, then this would be the right relationship for you. But she does approaches this stuff as like you would a 12-step program, like you would any addiction. I think that's super key, is take this seriously. And then the other thing is that there are practical things. There's dating coaches and therapy that would be very helpful once you do start to date. I do think it's important that there is a component of like cold turkeyness, but there are certain elements to keep in mind for what does constitute healthy partnership. You know, someone who is consistent, who is in integrity, who does not leave things ambiguous. Another practical tip that I would recommend is not to mix so much vulnerability with inconsistency. Like, let those things go together, that the vulnerability deepens with the consistency. That's like a huge, because it's such a toxic recipe when there's high vulnerability and low consistency. It's so unsafe in a gray, ambiguous zone. And the ambiguous zone is hugely a problem. And these are things that I had to learn. And I have a lot of more practical things that I've learned from dating, but I think that could be a separate video because I don't want to distract, because the purpose and the whole point of what I'm saying here is not that you're doing these things to get a person, but also doesn't mean you have to be alone for life and that you can never go back to dating again. So there is a way to go about it, I think, after you've taken proper time. And you don't have to go as slow as I have. I'm going exceptionally slow. And actually, that is one of Anna's, because I think she has a dating course. I haven't taken it, but from what I understand, because she says it a lot in her videos, is just like slow way down. Other things to look for is like, do you feel encouraged to be more of yourself around that person? Do they celebrate you and who you are? Is there a feeling of like grace and acceptance, you know, between you two? Those are all really good signs. And remember that we've been taught, you know, since childhood that love is coming, and that's just the natural flow of life. And all of our childhood movies are about that, even a lot of healing and law of attraction. And by no means is this video like anti-love or promoting nihilism or blackpilling, but a lot of times our wounds are coming from already feeling that sense of, from childhood, if I were good enough, my father wouldn't have left, because you already have that underlying self-worth issue, that if I just wasn't so needy, you know, if I was more lovable, if I wasn't so much. So what I'm suggesting is kind of the radical thing, and don't soften the work by saying, and then love will come in. Set that goal from the beginning that I'm going to love myself regardless, because whoever comes in or goes is irrelevant. The other thing I want to remind everyone of is that we lose everything anyway. We'll lose everyone. Relationships come, marriages happen, divorces happen, deaths happen, betrayal happens. Nothing is permanent anyway. And so it's more stable to do this for the only common denominator that's going to stay throughout all of the coming and going, and that is you and your consciousness and your awareness. That is always going to be there. So keep that focus there. Learn to work with the pain that is yours for no other reason other than it's yours and you're worth it. The other thing that I was going to say is the reality check component is so important, because narcissists know how to use that against you. They know how to use your lack of reality checking against you. So could it be just the way that I am looking at the situation that is the problem? Because sometimes that can be what actually maintains that storyline and maintains you thinking that you're this broken, obsessive, compulsive, love addicted person. Because when I look at my dating history, yes, there's times when I chase, unavailable people. But what if I started to tell a different story as well? Like maybe I don't continue to talk about my dad as he was this absent man, who died, even though that's what happened. The truth is that he sent me really sweet things, before he passed, and that I have had really funny stories, and I've heard really funny stories about him. I'm sorry, I'm moving around so much. I'm trying to figure out what to do about my leg. Maybe I could actually celebrate and change the way that I talk about him, instead of it always, being such a tragedy. And then I just celebrate his life, and I celebrate his pictures, and how handsome he was and all. What if I saw these cycles, these like dating cycles, not as proof of failure, but actually a proof of success? Of look at how you keep getting up, look at how you keep bravely trying, look at how you continue to work on yourself and hold yourself and continue to become this beautiful version of you over and over again. Like, what if that's the focus? Is not that you're a failure because you struggle, but you're incredible and courageous and strong because you're getting up and again and again and again. Because I do feel like that love addicted, heartbroken me is kind of a played out trite story, because actually when I look at the facts of the dating history, I want to say maybe like 90% of the time, I'm the one who's telling these guys it's not working out. And ending it with men who can't control their temper over Batman. For someone who has such an abandonment wound and such an anxious attachment issue, you sure don't put up with a whole lot. There's things to celebrate. And it's just, where am I holding the story as well, and this storyline that is continuing to keep it alive? But on that note, as beautiful as that felt and as empowering as it feels to switch the narrative, that is what Ram Dass would call just moving the furniture around in the room. You're still identified with the room. So while that feels more empowering, I would like to suggest an integrative approach where I am not feeling that the part of me that sometimes feels longing, that feels not enough, that was waiting for a father, that little girl in me, I love her just as much. And I don't feel like I need to pick between the confident feminist, don't need anyone, independent woman, and the person who wants to be held and is soft. And I'm not looking down upon her either. Both of these extremes and odds, they live within me, and I love both of them. I love both of them. They're both me equally. And so it's finding the ability to integrate. When you integrate and you allow, then you become the person who relentlessly looks after themselves. And that's the point. Your pain is not proof that you're fundamentally flawed. The fact that you hurt or that you long doesn't mean that you're a problem. In no way by making this video am I suggesting that I have risen above the desire for partnership. I think that would be beautiful. And I still want to do that. It's just not the most important thing to me. I am the most important thing to me. If you feel that you resonate with this wound, if I'm speaking to your heart, you are so okay. This is so normal. Just hold yourself through it. It's going to be fine. That's all I have for you today. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. Have a beautiful day.